Brittany, and welcome back to my channel. I focus mainly on fantasy novels, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Fires of Heaven, Book 5 in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I'm reading the Wheel of Time series for the first time right now, and my goal is to have all 14 of these books read before the TV show goes up on Amazon Prime. Whenever that will be. If you haven't seen my previous reviews, I will link the playlist up above. This review will start spoiler free and then delve into spoilers, and there will be a warning beforehand. So when I'm all caught up, I'm considering doing a reading vlog to really get some of those initial reactions filmed for you all, especially for the Wheel of Time books, because I know that that is what a lot of longtime fans really like, is seeing newbie readers to the series' initial reactions to some of the juicy plot and character development. And let's just jump right into the review. This book, while it does further develop the plot, it focuses more on developing the main characters. In this book, kind of like the last book, the stars were Rand and Perrin. In this book, the stars are Rand, Mat, and Nynaeve. And the three of them make up the bulk of the point of views. That being said, all three of them get some pretty good development in this book, so it was an enjoyable read. Each of the conflicts that these three characters have in their point of view, it's both internal and external. And so a lot of their point of views actually show the two of those different conflicts combined, and how how the real struggle and the development of the character can show itself in either an external factor or an internal factor, and how those two kind of play with each other. The pacing overall of The Fires of Heaven is fine. There is a middle section that feels very slow. We spend a lot of time in a very specific location where two main point of view characters are present, but they don't really do anything in this section except bicker. I mean, there are obviously things that happen in that section that are important, but I think it's not a controversial opinion to say that the middle chunk of this book could have been a bit quicker. It took me about 2 weeks to complete this book, same as The Shadow Rising. But kind of just like The Shadow Rising, it definitely felt like it was quicker than 2 weeks. So I think the pacing is fine overall. It's just that middle chunk that is not as enjoyable. So I do have a few critiques. These are spoiler free. They're overwhelmingly positive. We did stop following some characters that we were following in the last book in this book, and I kind of realized that with as many point of view characters as there are in the Wheel of Time, it's inevitable that some books are going to be missing some of those point of view characters just by the sheer number of. However, one of the point of view characters that we left behind in the last book that we don't see like at all in this book is my favorite character. So I was a little bummed out about not getting too much of him, but it's okay because I think that the journey and the story that happens in Fires of Heaven made up for it. There were also two female characters who went down drastically, in my opinion. I didn't like their actions. I didn't like some of the things that they said, and I do think that speaks to something on Jordan's abilities as a writer. You're never gonna have a steady opinion of one of these characters. From book 1 to book 14, how you feel about a character is going to ebb and flow between them being likable and them not being likable. So I don't think that it's necessarily a huge criticism of the book that a couple of the characters went down in my opinion of them. We do get to see more development both in relationships between characters and in actual character development, plot development. A lot of the arcs are really well done in this book, same as Shadow Rising. I would almost say that Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven, they're just very solid books. They're just such solid books. The development that happens in this book is pretty good. There was some meh stuff in it that affected a character's likability for me again, but for the most part, I loved every moment of Fires of Heaven. I rated it 5 stars on Goodreads, and I immediately jumped into Lord of Chaos after I finished, so I definitely recommend reading The Fires of Heaven. So now, with all of that being said, that's really all I can talk about in the spoiler-free section. So now we will be going into the spoiler section. So if you have not read The Fires of Heaven, you might want to click away from the video now. Okay, so just like in my last review, I have some standout moments. I want to talk about the relationships and arcs of the characters, and then tell you what my lingering questions are and what some predictions I had after. I think my first standout moment is when Swan manipulates the Aes Sedai. So where we left Swan in Shadow Rising, things were not exactly looking up for her. So having that moment where when her and Min and Leanne and Logain end up in Saladar with the Aes Sedai rebels, and seeing her she's still the same character even though she's been stilled, right? So these Aes Sedai, they're underestimating her. And so that whole scene where she subtly manipulates them into doing exactly what she wants them to do without them realizing it, I loved it. I thought it was a great moment. I hope that we see more of those moments from Swan, and that we get to see more of Swan as the series progresses. Because again, she's a character that I really like, and I want to see more of her. My second standout moment is one that I have some mixed feelings about. And it's when Elaine bonds Brigitta. So Brigitta has been helping Elaine and Naive in the last few books. Up until this point, we don't really know too much about the bond between a warder and an Aes Sedai. All we know is that there is some sort of bond, that it lasts until one or both of their deaths, and that warders get kind of an enhanced strength and healing factor situation, and there's been hints that the Aes Sedai and warders can, tell what each other are feeling. It was a good moment plot-wise because it gives us a chance to learn more about an Aes Sedai bonding a warder and what goes into that and the ramifications of that. But I also think it serves as a good way to foreshadow some of what might be happening in terms of warder bonds throughout this book and the next. I understand why Elaine bonded Brigitta. I think that in the situation that they were in, that was a good move. It did save Brigitta's life. I don't like that it was done non-consensually. They've made a big point out of harping on this fact that when a warder is bonded, it is something that is done with his permission. And it is something that an Aes Sedai should not just do. I know Brigitta ended up being kind of okay with it, but I think that also the turn that Elaine makes after bonding Brigitta, where she is now determined to bond Rand, that doesn't have good ramifications either, in my opinion, for what could happen. It makes me feel like Elaine is going to bond Rand non-consensually because she's already done it non-consensually once. What's to stop her from doing it again? My next standout moment is Mat winning the Kyrian battle where they were going up against the Shido in Couladin. I thought that was such a good moment. I loved it. I know we didn't actually get to see Mat fight Couladin or kill him, which was kind of unexpected for me. I didn't expect that Mat was going to be the one to do that. But what I loved that we saw instead was Mat saving those people. Mat constantly is trying to fight against his own ta'veren-ness and his destiny, and so he's not quite caught up with Perrin and Rand in terms of development of getting used to the idea of being this special person, and that means something, and that it means that you don't really have a lot of choice over your own actions. But I think Mat using his gift of battle strategy and military minds and memories in order to save those people who were about to be ambushed was really awesome. And so everything that comes with Mat having won that battle is very interesting. Again, it makes him a very valuable pawn, for lack of a better word, in Rand's plan. And so this was just another moment that shows that. which it was awesome. I love Matt more and more in each book, and I know that there's only more good things to come from him. So this is the moment that I didn't want to talk about because I have some feelings about it. I'm pretty sad still about it, but it definitely was a standout moment, and that was Moraines' death. I'm not completely sure that she's actually dead, but she is the mentor character, and in the hero's journey, the mentor character does typically die in order to make room for the hero to continue making his or her own decisions without kind of relying on this mentor character. However, I felt like Moraine and Rand's relationship had developed so well in this book and in the last book that I was very bummed out that they finally got to a point where they could see eye to eye, they could work with one another, and then she died. And the worst of it is that she knew. She knew she was going to die, and she still marched towards that death. I love Moraine. I thought that she was always getting the short end of the stick in the previous books from the rest of the characters in terms of suspecting her and not trusting her, and I think especially with her death, she really shows that she did have those characters' best interests at heart, and now what are they going to do without her? And so I was so upset. I was so upset at Moraines' death, but I think it had to happen, and I'm not completely sure that she is dead or will remain dead. So we'll see. And my last standout moment is Rand versus Robin versus Naive. So I loved that Naive was able to conquer Mogideon and then use her to channel when she wanted. And just that moment where Naive sent the fire at Robin and it both distracted Robin and alerted Rand to where Robin was, and then Rand was able to take Robin out and undo the deaths that had happened because of Robin, was just a stellar moment. It was also very interesting because just the coldness between Rand and Naive after that battle was a little bit unsettling. It was a little unsettling to see Rand and Naive just be so nonchalant about what just happened, especially with Rand. I mean, he hasn't seen Naive in a while, and he's just so nonchalant with her. I do think part of that might have been that at that moment he still thought Matt and Aviendha were dead. But it still stands out as an awesome moment that happened in this book. So when it comes to character relationships, that almost feels like that was more of the focus in this book than on some of the other aspects. We got a lot of development between Rand and Aviendha. I mean, a lot of development between them in this book. I am now of the opinion that Rand does not need the two other women, that Aviendha is the only one for him. I am Team Aviendha. I don't want the other ladies to even get any development with him, because at this point I'm rooting for him and Aviendha. I think Aviendha is best girl, and nothing can change my mind about that. I do think that their moment was very sweet. It was very intimate. It was kind of a long time coming. I did really like seeing their relationship further be developed through the beginning of this book, culminate in that moment in the igloo. I'm really bummed out that after that moment happened, that Aviendha dug in her heels about Elaine, and that after the ending, Rand has now decided to push Aviendha away and not be near any women, apparently. I understand why he's doing it, but it hurts me. It hurts the romantic within me. That he finally got this great moment with Aviendha after 2 books of build-up, and now it's all come crashing down around him. I also did like the development of Luce Theron. I set this under relationships. It does kind of go in Rand's character arc as well, but I think Luce Theron and the voice in Rand's head of Luce Theron like starting to grow stronger and really giving him not only additional plot reasons to be wary of certain characters, but also giving him almost an additional love interest with Ileana, and kind of factors into his reluctance to be around the people that he cares about. I think the whole tidbit with Luce Theron and him having information on the Forsaken and memories of the Forsaken that come from Lews Theron is very interesting, and it parallels Matt in a lot of ways, without the two of them realizing that they're actually on very similar journeys. Then there were two more relationships in this book that, again, one of them, I'm not sure how I feel about that yet, and that's Elaine and Brigitta. Obviously, their relationship deepened in this book with the bond and all of that. So I'm still holding out to see how that shakes up and how I feel about that at the end of the day. And the last relationship that really got some development in this book was a Gwen and Naive, actually. I didn't like it, though. I didn't like the reversal of their relationship. I felt like Egwene only did that because she was hiding a secret. She was lying. Instead of the two of them just coming out and talking to one another and telling each other, hey, this is why this is happening, this is why I'm doing this, there's this weird competition between the two of them where they feel like they have to be better than the other one, and I'm not a fan of it. Like, I understand that given their past relationships, that some kind of dichotomy between them is bound to exist, but I'm not a huge fan of the bickering and the lying and the one-upping, I guess, that is happening between these two women. It made me really not like Egwene. I felt a lot for Nynaeve in this book, and it could be because we followed Nynaeve more heavily than Elaine and Egwene, but I did not like the way that either of the younger girls treated Nynaeve. I felt like they didn't give her enough slack, and even though Nynaeve definitely should have been acting like the adult in the situation, I think that she was being ganged up on a little bit. And so I didn't. Elaine and Egwene both went down, in my opinion, in this book. I did not like Egwene being so snarky towards Nynaeve and kind of giving this air of I'm better than you, and I did not like that Elaine became hyper possessive of Rand in this book. It was almost to the point where I couldn't read her point of views sometimes because I didn't want to read her point of views because I just knew it was going to be more of her feeling this hyper entitlement to Rand, which, as I've said, I'm not really a fan of that kind of feeling toward another person. I think it's a little much. So there were three main character arcs that happened in this book. We had Matt's arc, we had Rand's arc, and we had Nynaeve's arc. And I think, so Matt and Rand's arcs were kind of just the next step in arcs that they've already started. Matt definitely becomes a military general in this book. He's got the memories, he's got the fighting skill, his luck definitely factors in here, and he fights so heavily against it in the beginning of the book, but then he kind of gives into it. And so I think that he had good development over the course of the book. I am interested to see what will happen with Matt if he does get a chance to get away from Rand for a time and further develop those skills. But I imagine at this point that Matt is going to be pretty firmly tied to Rand because Rand is going to need him to be his strategist. I'm also very interested to see what happens with the Band of Red Hand. I feel like that kind of connects Matt back to Rogosh Eagle Eye a little bit. And so there were already connections between Matt and Eagle Eye, but now I think that the Band of Red Hand is just going to further those connections. So I'm interested to see what develops of that. With Rand, he kind of comes more into his own as the Dragon Reborn. There's not really much left of the farm boy that we knew. Rand is very cold, he's very calculating, he makes choices because of what is before him. He decides to use his friends even as he feels guilty about using them, but then immediately swats away that guilt. He makes choices and does things that you'd not expect, and it's because I think he's changed so much from the first couple books that, like I said, it's almost like you're not even following the same character anymore. He's almost a completely different character. And I don't know if that journey is supposed to parallel Lews Theron becoming more prominent in his head, but that definitely could be. As Lews Theron's voice grows more powerful, Rand's character could change even further, which I think is a very interesting conflict for Rand to have. It's another situation where the conflict of his destiny is being impacted in a very tangible way through Theron's voice getting stronger. And then the last character arc that we had was Naive, and I almost think that her arc in this book was the best. So she falls into 3 different traps because my girl literally cannot avoid traps. She's got this fight against Mogideon, and she fights Mogideon more than once in this book. And I think that is her battle against Mogideon is kind of the external expression of her arc, and her confidence and her bravery is the internal expression of that arc. She repeatedly feels like she's afraid, and she needs to be more courageous, be more brave and confident in herself. But of course, that's the kind of the arc that she goes through, is that she gets into a trap because of her confidence, and then it progressively gets worse for her because of her confidence, and so her confidence is shattered. But I loved that the conclusion of her arc in this book was her winning out over Mogideon at the end. That was a beautiful way to illustrate how her arc went in this book. And I love that she actually did succeed in that struggle. It also kind of mirrors her struggle with Egwene. So she does also almost win out against Egwene. Her being afraid of Mogideon is reflected in her being afraid to meet with Egwene. So all around, Naive's writing in this book was phenomenal. I loved it. I thought it was awesome, and she was faltering a bit in my list of favorite characters because there were some sections in the middle books of what I've read where she was kind of a little bit annoying, and in this book it just shot her right back up to top of the list for me. So I really appreciated Naive's arc in this book. So last, I've got some lingering questions and predictions to make about the rest of the series. So my first set of lingering questions is, who's Mogideon? So at the very end of the book, we find out that Naive has already figured out who Mogideon is in the physical world, and so of course that was my first question, is who is she? Because I did not pick up on any hints of who she could have been. So my next one is, who will the Aes Sedai put up as the Amyrlin? Swan deftly manipulates them into deciding that they should have a biddable child put up as their Amyrlin who was not present in the tower during Elida's coup. My next lingering question is, are Lanfear and Moraine actually dead? So I'm almost 100% sure that Lanfear is not really dead or will return, but I'm not as sure about Moraine, and I have mixed feelings about whether or not she should return. My next question is, what is happening with Perrin in the Two Rivers? So Perrin was the character that we didn't get any point of view of. We just got mentions of him in Rebellion in the West and Manetheren, and some hints about what's been going on with Perrin in the Two Rivers in this book, but we didn't actually get to see it. So Perrin is my favorite character. I'm hoping that we get some of him in the next book. Next question is, what's Rand's next move going to be? This is a question that I pretty much have at the end of like every one of these books, except for the last one. The last one I knew that he would probably, or at the end of Dragon Reborn, I knew he would probably end up in the Aiel Waste. But other than that, my one lingering question I always have with this series is, how is this story going to fit into 14 books? So I'm always curious about what the next book is going to focus on in terms of Rand's moves. My next question is, who killed Asmodean? So obviously Asmodean dies at the very end of the Fires of Heaven, and it's supposed to be, he says, "You? No!" So obviously it's someone that he knows that kills him, and so that kind of gives an air of mystery of who actually did kill Asmodean. My very last lingering question is, how will the Seanchan come back into play? So we've had some brief mentions of the Seanchan in the last few books. They've definitely played a part in it. For instance, in this book, right, when they're in the Winter Wonderland with the igloo, and they're actually in Seanchan land, and so I'm interested how the Seanchan come back into play, because they're obviously an enemy that's going to last the entire series, I think. So my first prediction for the rest of the series at some point is that someone is going to bond Rand non-consensually. My money is on Elaine doing it. But I would not be surprised if someone else did instead, or if it happens to him multiple times. But right now the foreshadowing kind of points toward Elaine. I do think Lan will eventually wind up bonded to Naive. So he seems to be fighting against their relationship. I just want them to be together. But I do think that based on Moraines' actions that she kind of hinted at in the last few books and her point of view, that she has set it up so that her bond with Lan will eventually pass to Naive. So I think Naive just needs to be raised to Aes Sedai, and then she will probably be given Lan's bond, which would be a very awesome way for the two of them to end up together, I think, even if it came at the price of Moraines' death. My next prediction is that Lanfear is not really dead, or she is going to return in some fashion after this book. Okay, so to be honest, the main reason why I think this is because at some point, I think Rand in this book says that Lanfear has a Winter's Heart, or that she is Winter's Heart, and there's a book in the series called Winter's Heart. And I just felt like that that connection there is too strong for me to think that she's not going to return at some point. So I think Lanfear is not really dead, and she will come back. I also think that Lews Theron is going to grow stronger. He's the voice of Lews Theron. And that is what is going to cause Rand's madness, and not some other factors. Because up until now, I've been kind of wondering what Rand's madness is going to materialize as, and I think Lews Theron's voice is it. My very, very last prediction that I will make is that I think that the Aes Sedai and Saladar are going to put Egwene up as the Amyrlin. Egwene in her accepted trials had the situation where she was Amyrlin, and Elida did a coup against her, and with the comment of it needing to be a biddable child, I do think it's going to be Egwene. I think that Egwene is who they will rise to their Amyrlin, and that would be an interesting turn of events if that is in fact what happens. That is all I have for you today on Fires of Heaven. It is a great book. I hope that you read it. I hope that you love it. I want everyone to read Wheel of Time now. I think it's fantastic. Thank you for tuning into this video. I would love it if you would leave me a like, maybe subscribe, and put a comment down under the video of what your favorite standout moment in the Fires of Heaven is. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to say it's the igloo. Which, if that was your favorite moment, then that's totally cool. I'm, again, hashtag Team Avienda. So, yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in another one. Bye!